Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Ayin Aleph 71. We pick up at the bottom of Ayin Metzia, and actually we finally turn from some of the technical discussions, the halachic discussions about the parameters of ribis, Torah ribis, Rabbanan ribis, Avak ribis, to actually looking at the prohibitions associated with it. So if you take a look at some sort of more broader practical issues. So if you take a look at the Gemara at the bottom of Ayin Aleph, we start with quoting the pasuk. Marbeh, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 12 lines from the bottom. It says the word Mina B'chora, right? It says Mishle in the left-hand margin. Okay, Marbeh no b'neshech v'tarbit, the person who increases their wealth through neshech and tarbit, through ribis, through charging interest. The chonin dalim yikabtzenu. We'll gather it for the person that will do kindness to the poor.
How do you know it's for a person?
Michael, let me get a sentence out. Okay, so anyway, maybe it's God. Okay, fine. All right, fine. So anyway, so you're trying to become wealthy. In the end of the day, your money is ultimately going to go to the poor. God will see that it'll go to the poor. Right? Michael's correct. Chonin dalim could mean God will ultimately gather, but it could mean whatever. The money will pass down to somebody who's going to give it back to the poor. My chonin dalim. Who is this chonin dalim? What's meant by the pasuk? Amarav going shvor malka. Like Shvor Malka, who was the Persian ruler, which is interesting. Rashi says that the Persian ruler would basically take the wealth of, tax the Jews and distribute the money to the poor of the non-Jews, which is, all right, fine, whatever. I mean, that happens in every government. People are taxed and the money is redistributed. But presumably the Gemara is reading this, that actually is particularly the people who charge interest are suffer this fate. So the point is, the money doesn't even stay within the Jewish people. You're charging interest, and ultimately the money is now going to be taxed and distributed to the non-Jews. Okay, that's at least the way Rashi understands it. Is there a problem, or this is just trying to figure out where we are?
No,
okay, fine. All right, anyway. Okay, so Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Li Huna. So Rav Huna said to me, Lo nitzchel dafila ribis tov tekochavim. Not only that, not only is the money now going to be redistributed to the poor non-Jews, but this would even be true about ribis that was charged to non-Jews, which seems to be allowed in the Torah. Not only allowed, maybe even like encouraged, but minimally allowed in the Torah. And here the Gemara is saying, no, you should be staying away from the whole thing, even from charging non-Jews. And if you do, ultimately you're going to lose that money, and it's going to be even, redistributed.
That's why you probably quoted that pasuk,
right? So anyway, exactly. So the Gemara says Ezei Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman asked Rav Nachman, how can you say that this is true? That there's a problem about charging interest to non-Jews? It says you shall lend to the non-Jew with interest. Now, my love tashuch. Now again, we get back to a point in the beginning of the Gemara that the Gemara assumes that the word tashich actually means to borrow with interest, and the Gemara really reads this as from the foreigner you may borrow with interest. And then Gemara is just saying, doesn't it also include the idea that you can lend the foreigner with interest? My tashich, lav tashuch, doesn't mean you could lend the foreigner with interest. So the Gemara says, lo. Tashich, no, you borrow from them with interest, but you're not allowed to lend. The Gemara says, all right, and how does that make sense? Lo sagi de lav hachi. So what? So you're only allowed to. So you're supposed to borrow with interest from the non-Jew. Like, what does that mean? Like, why is the Torah encouraging that, or sort of pointing that out? It's one thing to say you can lend them with interest. Why is it saying you borrow from them with interest? So the Gemara says no. La fuke achicha tolo. No, you're right. The Torah doesn't have to tell you can borrow from the non-Jew with interest, but it's to tell you, to imply only from the non-Jew can you borrow from interest. You can't borrow from the Jew with interest. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? It explicitly says not to borrow from your fellow Jew with interest.
The next word.
The next words don't. Again, you have to take for granted that the Gemara here is reading the word tashich, meaning to borrow, not to lend, which I don't think is pshat at all. But anyway, so the Gemara says the next words say don't borrow from a Jew with interest. So why do you have to imply it by saying borrow from a non-Jew with interest? So the Gemara says, all right, in order to make it doubly prohibitive. Do not borrow from your fellow Jew with interest, and only borrow, if you're going to borrow from interest, only be from a non-Jew. So when you borrow from a Jew, you've transgressed even that positive mitzvah that you're supposed to only borrow from a non-Jew. Anyway, what we've done is we've basically limited the psukim to talk about borrowing, so to get out of the fact that the psukim should seem to be explicitly condoning lending to a non-Jew with interest. Now the question is, well, as we know just from the whole history of the Middle Ages, right? Since when is it usher to lend a non-Jew with interest? Why is the Gemara sort of choosing to discourage that activity and to like even resist reading the psukim to allow it? So we're going to see in a minute. Let's continue the Gemara a little bit. I'll ask on this. Loving mehenu malvino sam beribis. You can borrow from them and lend to them obviously being non-Jews, with ribis. So it's the first teaching that you're allowed to lend to non-Jews with interest. So why were you discouraging it before? That statement that God will take away your wealth if you lend to non-Jews with interest. So the Gemara says, not only is it allowed to non-Jews, it's even allowed to a ger toshav. I mean, to not just standard non-Jews, even to a ger toshav, who's a non-Jew who's accepted the Sheva Mitzvah Noach and so on. So it's explicit. So Amar Rav Chia Breid Rav Huna lo nitzcha ela bichtei chayav. Okay, fine. It is explicit. It is mutter to lend to a non-Jew with interest, but only not to go ahead and make like a business and a big profit out of it and get wealthy. Only minimally what you need to do to support yourself. Okay, you need to make a basic parnasa and put food on the table. You can lend to non-Jews with interest, but you should not do it to become wealthy. Now, clearly at this stage, we're not claiming that it's not allowed from the Torah. It's not allowed from the Torah, right? You would not make these distinctions. Clearly, there's some rabbinic concern here that is, yes, obviously, and they can allow us to go back to the earlier psukim. Fine, it's mutter to lend non-Jews with interest, but the rabbis didn't like it, and they only allowed it up to basically making a basic parnasa. Now, what's the concern? What is the rabbinic concern? So if you look at Rashi says, b'chtei chayav, hitirlo. That amount the rabbis allowed. Yomi kan asur midarabanan. Again, now Rashi makes implicit. Fine, forget the idea that there's a Torah problem. It's rabbinic. Dilma asi lemeisrach. Maybe you'll come to be dragged after, which presumably means that once you make a big business, well, that's one possibility. One possibility is you'll learn from non-Jews, which is what we'll get to in a minute. But the other possibility is you'll be dragged after this behavior. Once you're making a big profit lending with interest, why close out a whole market? You've got all the Jews to lend it with interest to. So, because the thing is usher when done with Jews, you want to sort of always relate to it with a certain amount of hesitation. Right? You don't want to give too much of a license to, go ahead, make a lot of money lending with interest. That sends a signal. So so I might as well lend with Jews with interest. So you always want to keep a sense of limits and restrictions. That's one answer. But the other now, Gemara continues, that has more to do with interaction with non-Jews. No, when is it permissible to lend non-Jews with interest? Forget the idea of how much you're lending. That's when you're dealing with, yeshiva students, right? Torah scholars. Time of my gazer rabbanon shemi yilamid mi ma'asav. So this gives a different reason, or maybe it's a different way of reading the Rashi of Asim and Misrach. Okay, the reason is that if you have too much interactions, like you get non-Jews walking in and out of your door every single day, coming to borrow money, right? So it's regular interactions, and not only that, like you could say, well, does that mean that I can't go into business because I have non-Jewish customers? No, but here the idea is your customer base is limited to non-Jews. Right? You cannot engage Jews with this business. So you have to be soliciting non-Jewish business and getting involved in the non-Jewish community. Well, that's going to draw you after the non-Jews. Okay, that's going to lead to pulling you away from Jewish observance. So or at least a Jewish ethics or whatever. So Shema Yilamid Mimasav. Even the Talmid Chacham Yilamid Mimasav. And since he's a Talmid Chacham, though, he's careful enough not to learn from that. So here we get the idea that Torah, yes, okay, but no, that's why I tried to emphasize that it's not just any interaction with non-Jews. It's something that is completely limited, and that the whole way you make money is by ignoring, not dealing with Jews and totally focusing your efforts with the non-Jews. But what does that mean? It means that I can't go ahead and go to a market. I got this great market in China where I can go ahead and make a lot of money. I'm not allowed to do it because I'm only going to be dealing with non-Jews. So, I assume that it's also a little bit of the other element, that this is something that is usher in other contexts. So we remain a little bit hesitant. But what you have here in the Gemara is that while it's obviously permitted in the Torah to lend to non-Jews with interest, it is rabbinically we put restrictions on it. Whether it's a concern about just generally not giving yourself too much license because it's, because it'll lead to lending with Jews. You want to always treat it as a davar aser, thank you, or because it focuses your interactions with non-Jews. So the question is, what do you do about the entire, ways in which Jews in Christian Europe earned money in the Middle Ages? By the way, I assume everybody knows that the reason this was the primary enterprise of Jews in the Middle Ages in Christian Europe is because, as opposed to Muslim lands, is because the Christians would not let Jews own land, and they would restrict the Jews from most other businesses. This was one of the few businesses that was left open to Jews. And because the Christians took upon themselves the prohibition of lending interest to fellow Christians. So the only way Christians could borrow money was by borrowing it from Jews. So it was quite interesting. This was one of the Isurim in the Torah that the Christians actually, in terms of that even post-Jesus decided that there was still binding on them as it applied to fellow Christians. So anyway, but what did you do about these restrictions? Non-Christians. Their achicha, I'm totally serious, their achicha was Christians. Okay, so anyway, and people needed to borrow money. So of course, as we know, that led to terrible anti-Semitism and Jews as money lenders and the whole thing. Anyway, take a look here. Tosfos says the following. He says, he says like this. The bottom of Ayin Amud Bet, the Tashich. It's about the fifth line into that Tosfos. What line starts the word Shenahagu. Okay. Now we have a practice of lending to non-Jews. It's a rabbinic issue, this restriction to non-Jews, and we're lenient by rabbinic issues. Now, so who are we relying on? So we're going to see in a minute that this statement that said, remember the statement said, what was the statement? Right? So that was the statement. Even ribis of a non-Jew. So we said that means you're not supposed to lend the non-Jew with interest. But we're going to see in a minute that the Gemara applies that line to a completely different context. So Tosfos' first answer is, we're going to go like the second lashon in the Gemara, which we're about to read, that this statement was never said. It was never said in the context that you cannot lend a non-Jew with interest. So number one, we don't paskin like this at all. Okay. Number two, even according to what we just read, that it is said that to non-Jews you should limit your interactions of lending with interest. Yesh lahatio, you can still allow it. We have heavy taxes on us now from the king and from the sarim are the nobles, right? It was feudal lands. Any money that we can earn is kedei chayenu. Anything is earning a basic parnasa. So even I guess it means if that some Jews got very wealthy, maybe they assumed the whole trickle-down effect. I'm serious. That if as a general rule, the Jewish community had very limited options of earning money, you have to allow, any money to come into the community, and therefore it's all considered to be basic sustenance.
Why? Does it mean because
if I make a lot of money, then I'm going to do business for the Jewish community, and right, exactly. That's how I'm reading Tosfos. Okay, because so number one is it's all considered basic sustenance.
One is we pass in like somebody else.
One is we don't pass in this Gemara, we pass in the next lesson, which we're about to read. Number two is it's all basic sustenance. The Ode, we're among the non-Jews. We have no opportunity to earn money with anything else. Unless we do this, we lend this. Now, so how's that different than the Kedei Chayenu answer? So here's the answer. It's the point I said before. It's like going ahead and selling. You have a market in China. So it says you're not making a choice. Like it's one thing if you say you could choose to do a nice business within the Jewish community, and you're running to make much to deal with the non-Jews. So it says we don't have any other options. So you don't have any other options. This was to say you shouldn't lend to non-Jews was when there were other reasonable options. This was not the ideal choice. But if there are no other reasonable options, and this is where you can make your panasa, and this is the only opportunity, then this is.
But if you hold this Talmidei Chachamim, then none of that gets off the ground, right? There's the first answer was Kedei Chaya, we let everyone.
Yeah, Tosfos is not limiting this to Talmidei.
Right? No, I know. But I'm saying, but if you look at the Talmidei Chachamim, it's only a Talmidei Chacham, and even that's Kedei Chaya, maybe.
What?
According to the one that says Talmidei Chachamim. Would the Talmidei Chacham have a license to do it no matter what? Or would it still be Kedei Chaya?
It sounds like.
I looked that up. The Rambam said both of the Shana. It says like the first one's that everyone Kedei Chaya and Talmidei Chacham can do it.
Right, he passes both heterim.
The other one's like, yeah.
Right. Right, exactly. Both of them could be true. Everybody's Kedei Chayav and Talmidei Chachamim, no limits. Anyway, but Tosfos says that obviously that has to do away with getting rid of these restrictions. So either he's going to say we don't pass it at all, or both Heterim apply to us. Everything is considered to be a basic sustenance, and the problem of it's not that all Talmidei Chachamim, but the problem of Yilamid Mimasav is only when it's an equivalent choice. When it's not an equivalent choice, then of course it's allowed. Okay, now the Gemara continues. So obviously very, very relevant. Now the Gemara says, and it's also always nice to see a little history brought in from Tosfos' discussion. Okay, now here's the other lashon that Tosfos says it doesn't even read this to have applied to restrict lending to non-Jews. Some teachers taught that statement of Rav Huna about ribis of non-Jews, not to restrict, but on the following teaching of Rav Yosef. What did Rav Yosef teach? Very, very famous. This is usually important in terms of laws of tzedakah and so on. The next line we're about to read. It's interesting that it gets brought in the Rib's context. If you lend money to my nation, to the poor among you. So this now tells you, says Rav Yosef, a hierarchy of how you're supposed to just lend money. And by the way, all these psukim in the Torah about lending money are often immediately translated by Chazal when it talks about lending money to Jews as also obligations of tzedakah, of giving money to Jews. We should point out why that is for a moment. According to the Torah, I will challenge anybody to find anywhere in the Torah where it says you have a mitzvah to give money to the poor. The only time in the Torah you give something to the poor is in the context of lechet, shifchan, pay, and so on. Okay, which has a certain amount of dignity. The poor come and they actually work for it and they gather and so on. Patoach tiftach. If you read the psukim, it's about lending money. It is not about giving money. So all the psukim in the Torah about money are about lending money. Now, the reason is, when you give somebody a straight out gift, charity, alms, or whatever, it can obviously, be compromise their sense of dignity. They're dependent on you and the whole thing. But when you lend money, it retains that sense of dignity. You're lending and I'm going to pay back. And I'm an equal member of society. I'm not casting myself at the mercy of others and so on. Okay, the only problem is that if you lend money, sometimes I won't be able to pay back. And I'll also have to pay interest, so etc. So the Torah addresses those problems. It says after 7 years, if you can't pay back, the loan is wiped clean. You don't have to pay interest. So actually, it's the best of both worlds. You borrow the money, and you get the money in a way of borrowing, which preserves your dignity, as opposed to just receiving it as alms. And at the other hand, you don't have the bad stuff about the borrowing. You try to pay back, which is also good because it helps, it means it keeps recycling the same money and so on. And it makes me more industrious if I have to pay back. But if you can't, then it gets wiped clean and you also will be protected from interest. So that's why in the Torah, the tzedakah of money is lending money. But Chazal immediately interpreted all these psukim also to be referring, or primarily sometimes to be referring to giving money. Anyway, so what we're about to read is a priority of lending money, but you might have been familiar with this teaching around issues of priorities of tzedakah, because that's how it's usually translated as. All right? So in Kesef Talvet Ami Etani Imach, Ami V'Nochri Ami Kodem. My nation and the foreigner, in Kesef Talvet Et Ami, so the first person you have an obligation to lend money to is my nation, Ami Kodem. Okay, Amikodem. Ani va'ashir. If you can choose between giving it to a poor person or a wealthy person, ani kodem. In kesef toveh et ami. So first you lend to my nation. Even within my nation, there's a priority. Et ani. You first have to lend to poor before you lend to wealthy. Ani kodem. Now, within lending to poor people, et ani imach. The poor person that is closer to you is the person you have the prior obligation to. Your poor, meaning the poor of your family and the poor of your town, then it's your poor. It's imach. Those that are closer to you, you have a greater obligation. Those of your town or another town, your town comes first. So this is a big teaching in the context of priorities of tzedakah. The important thing to note, though, is that there are two basic. First of all, is that there are two different criteria going on here. One is degree of closeness. Those that are closer to you, you have a greater obligation. Closer could be defined as geographically closer, my city, another city. They could be defined as relationship closer, my relatives, my family, people that are not my relatives, and also about a sense of closeness in terms of co-religionists, or you want that to form a family, Jews versus non-Jews. Okay, but one measure is degree of closeness, though closeness defined in different ways. The other measure is degree of need, poor versus rich. Raises very interesting questions of which one of those is more important.
Right. Like let's say
Right?
someone poor
Somebody
far away,
in another town they need money for food and for clothing, but my relative needs money to send their kids to a better school.
So
So what's the priority, right? So it's a big discussion in the post. Which of those two sort of criteria, what's the right mix or balance of those two criteria? It's not clear in the Gemara. Different posts can have different.
But is it certain that if the poor person is not Jewish, you still give to the?
So the other issue is when the Gemara says my nation and the foreigner, my nation comes first. Does that mean that I do have an obligation to a foreigner? It's just lower on the list of priorities. It sounds that way, actually. Although it is rare to find a posek that says that. The Meiri, who often is very inclusive of non-Jews, tries to sort of read more of a broader sense of obligation towards non-Jews. The Meiri actually says that explicitly, that there is an element of obligation of real, towards non-Jews to lending with tzedakah. I mean, it's a broader question. What's our general sense of obligation to non-Jews? Obviously, quote, broad psukim, balachta, bidrachav, darchei shalom, etc. But is there a technical tzedakah obligation to non-Jews? So this might seem that the answer is yes, except that it's lower on the priority list. And the Meiri sort of says that, although he waffles a little. He says at least there's an ethical obligation to them, or there's a little obligation to them. Mostly people read that the non-Jews here are being completely excluded from the obligation, and the rest is setting priorities. But the simple language of this breita is that non-Jews is obligated. It's just different in terms of the degree of priority. Yes,
this is a little strange to what I see as the halachic mind. And I always wonder about this because if you have it in terms of priorities, then the first priority is never exhausted, right? There are always poor people, who need basic necessities closer to you than somebody else far away.
Right. So the Aruch HaShulchan basically raises that. He says, so you're supposed to give all your money to those that are in your immediate family, even if there's people that are desperately in need. So that's why there are two. There's two different sets of criteria. But you are correct that you could sort of say, okay, but even within the, let's say, proximity criteria, right? So let's say, so if there's equal level of needs within, or whatever, my family and, or this town and the neighboring town, I'm not supposed to give any money to the neighboring town because so that's why these are seen more as like guidelines rather than like, these aren't like the laws of like a kosher esrog, these are more general guidelines.
Typically, the halachic process would end up by saying, X percentage to this.
Right. So I think it's very interesting in general that in areas, what I would call like ethical areas, or the degree of specificity and of quantification is much less than in cases of like whether I have to repeat Yalav Yavo and it's December 5th or what my esrog has to look like. And there's two reasons. One is because the reality of the human condition is can't be quantified. Like the degrees of context and circumstances can never be reduced to a certain set of criteria. But the other reason is, I think, because we want these mitzvahs to not just be following rules. We want them to be exercising your ethical judgment. We want them to continue to be ethical acts. And if all you're doing is looking up in the Shulchan Aruch, oh, this is how I have to distribute my money today because the Shulchan Aruch says this is how you distribute it, then it just becomes rule following and it doesn't become an ethical act. So, but it isn't true.
The motivation for
I don't know. That's me philosophizing, but I do note that it's not an exception. Generally, you find in the ethical realm that things are much less specified. Much more allows certain context and a degree of judgment that you don't find in other areas. Yes.
So I want to make sure I'm getting this. So let's say the choice is between like the poor let's say, if this guy is not Jewish, but homeless on the street, or sending someone else to yeshiva day schools. Right. Would that win based on what we're saying here? Because there's only your co-religionist versus the other. I mean, that's basically, we're still saying that.
No, I mean, we don't know. It's true. You have different sets of criteria. You don't know which one is more important. So it remains unclear.
So you're saying there's some posts that would actually say
that in terms of the non-Jew case? Yeah. No, non-Jew in general, that's what I said. In general, even the Meiri, who generally is more inclusive of non-Jew, here sort of says there's a somewhat obligation to non-Jew. So the non-Jews are not read as just a priority. It's read as much more of a more categorical, different type of obligation. Okay, moving on. Though the one other thing I should say about the idea that your obligation is greater to those closer to you I should point out that that's, in my mind, one of the most important Jewish ethical principles, which is basically chayecha v'chaya achicha chayecha kodmin, right? Which is not just true about your life, but it's also true about your financial well-being. Which doesn't mean your needs come before your desires come before other people. It doesn't mean you enrich yourself at other people's expense, rather than taking care of other people. But it does mean that you do have a primary responsibility to protect, to yourself. So that's just an extension of the idea that your obligation is greater to those closer to you. Who's closer to you than yourself? Okay, so anyway, the Gemara now continues. So what does this have to do with anything we're discussing? So Amar, Ami v'nochi Ami Kodem. My nation and the foreigner, my nation, I'm sure it's Pshita, obviously. So it's just that Pshita that for many poskim, besides the general inclination, means that they treat this as not just a priority issue, but as a complete exclusion. Anyway, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Lihuna, Lo nitzracha dafilu nachri beribis, L'Yisrael b'china. Here's the statement. The statement of a non-Jew with ribis is not that you're not allowed to lend a non-Jew with ribis. We never said such a thing. The statement is that if you have a choice between lending to a non-Jew with interest, and you can actually make a parnasa off of it and make some money, or lending to a Jew and for free, and you're obviously not going to make money that way, okay, you nevertheless have to lend your money to the Jews and not to the non-Jews. Okay, so it's not just the priority aspect is obvious, but here it's telling you that you even have to forego a certain amount of financial gain. Now, what does that mean? I mean, if I'm in the business of lending money with interest to non-Jews, right, do I have to now take away all of my funds that I use for that business in order to lend?
Well, presumably not.
Presumably not. Presumably, we're not talking about somebody who's in the business of doing that. We're talking about, I'm just a guy, and a non-Jew comes and says, lend me $1,000, I'll even pay you interest, and the Jew says, I need the $1,000, so you have to give it to the Jew. Okay, all right. So now the Gemara says,
and this is what Tosfos passes like. Right?
Well, he says one way to understand is that we read it this way: we never restricted lending to a non-Jew with interest at all. Okay.
I say, Rabbi,
yes.
Underlying all, I get all this, but in other words, it is so obvious that it will create animosity. Right. The whole thing creates animosity.
Right. Well, yeah. So I mean, obviously, first of all, the flip side of this is the whole Mipnei Darchei Shalom. Which is exactly that, which recognizes that, as Seth was saying, the insularity, whatever, can create an enormous amount of animosity. That's Even Darchei Shalom. But even that's just a practical reaction. Like, you don't want to do things that get people angry. Then there's other later discussions to see this as even an ethical obligation. Like the Iri I mentioned, Rambam reads Darchei Shalom is not just self-interest and ways of getting them to act nicely, but Rambam says Darchei Shalom is derech haTorah, because Torah is kol misivoseh shalom, and it's basically an ethics that you extend to all people. So there are different voices in the Gemara. Okay. Yeah, exactly. All right. So now the Gemara says like this: Tanya, I'm Reb Yossi. Go and see the blindness of people who lend with ribis, how they could be so blind to their own, their own reputation. Russia. If somebody were to call, if somebody were to call somebody else a Russia, the person who would be so offended that he would make the other guy's life a living hell. Okay, so nobody wants to be called a Russia. Nevertheless, you're going to lend with ribis. What are you doing? You're about to do this big avera that you're going to lend with ribis. Hey, mevim edim, belavler, bekolmis. You make a big production out of it for the avera you're about to do. You bring witnesses and a scribe and the quill, the dio and the ink, the kosin, the chosman, and you write and you sign. And here's what you're signing in your shtar. You don't realize this, but this is what you're signing to. Ploni zeh kafar below Yisrael. This person who's lending with ribis, I'm rejecting the God of Israel. So you're basically announcing to everybody how you're such a Russia, that you're lending with ribis. You're not hiding it. Most people, you do a sin, do it in private at least. Okay, and it just shows how blind you are to the statement that you're making about yourself. All right, somehow this reminds me of this story. I forget who it was about, but I think it was, I don't know. I remember this note of you. It could have been somebody else. Anyway, so somebody in the town lent money with interest and made became very wealthy at the expense of his fellow Jews. And when he died, the townspeople did not want the Chevra Kedisha wanted to charge the heirs an exorbitant amount for the plot. Figure the town will at least get back some of the money that they've lost to this guy over the years. So the family sued and brought them to secular court. Like they said, this isn't fair. There's a standard price for the plot. We shouldn't have to pay. So they brought them to secular court. So whoever it is, I'm going to say the Noda Yehuda, came to testify. And he said, look, The standard price is for everybody else, because really, we Jews, we believe in Tchias HaMesim. So when you're buying a funeral plot, you're not really buying it.
It's a rental.
So that's the price for the rental. It says, but the Gemara says, Malvi Baribis ain't lam chelek l'olam haba. So for him, it's a permanent sale. So it's a fair price. All right. Anyway, so all right. But what is again fascinating is that the Gemara acknowledges here, where it does in a few cases, that there's a segment of the population that is just blatantly, flagrantly, violating the Torah law. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay, Tanya, we're talking about Brisa. Rabbi Shimon or Linzer Omer. If you have money and you lend them without ribbis, you never gave your money with interest for shochat al nakilo lakach, and you never took a bribe to judge guilt, to judge an innocent person guilty. If somebody who acts this way will never stumble. Halamada tell you, this teaches you that if you do lend with ribbis, your property will fail, will falter. Eventually all your wealth will go, will be lost. That's the best way to try to scare people to not sin, right? It's because if the reason they're doing it is because they think they're going to get rich, so say, no, you're not going to get rich. All the money is going to get lost. Okay, so the Gemara says, it's interesting. The Gemara could challenge this. I would have expected the Gemara to challenge it to say, we see people lending with interest and they don't lose their money. Now, maybe it did want to say that, but you don't want to admit that, right? Because if you admit that in print, right, that's a little dangerous to admit that phenomenon. So the Gemara asks the other phenomenon. We see people don't lend with ribbis and still they lose their money, in the stock market or whatever. A lot of innocent people lose their money. So, it's not true that if you don't lend with ribbis, your money is protected. No. If you don't lend with ribbis, sometimes your fortunes go down, but then they go up again. So later, the stock market will go up. But if you lend with ribbis, the fortunes go down and they never come up again. All right, I don't know if that's actually true, but it's exactly. Anyway, it's an important statement to make. Okay, Lama Tabit Pogdim. Now, continuing this context, why, God, do you look at the spoilers? Tacharish Kabbalah Rasha Tzadik Mimenu. You're silent when the wicked person swallows up the one who is more righteous than he. Amarav Tzadik Mimenu Baleya. Tzadik Gomer Eina Baleya. The wicked can swallow up somebody who's more righteous than he on a relative scale, but he will not be able to destroy somebody who is totally righteous, objectively righteous. So this seems, the way Rashi reads this, is reinforcing the point we said before. Somebody who's really a tzaddik will never totally lose their wealth. It might go down, but it'll come up again. Okay. So, but again, now we're living it to a tzaddik gamor, which also helps, right? Because now there's a lot of phenomenon that don't fit with this model, but now we're limiting it to a tzaddik gamor. Okay, Tanya, we're talking about Brisa. Rabbi Omer, Ger Tzedek Amar Li'inyan Mechira v'Ger Toshav Amar Li'inyan Ribbis. When the Torah talks about a righteous convert, about a convert, in the case about sale, and when it talks about a Ger Toshav, right, a resident alien, in the case of Ribbis, in Yodei Mahu. I don't know how to read that properly into the pasuk. What does that mean? So now we're going to unpack this statement. Ger Tzedek Amar Li'inyan Mechira D'chsiv V'chiyamuch achicha imach v'nim karlach. Okay, when your brother gets poor and is sold to you, don't, and he sells himself as a slave, don't work him, don't take advantage, don't work him overly hard. So it says, so this is, now the context here is that this parsha appears right after the whole parsha about Shemitah. And the musar that Chazal give about this parsha is, if you do business with Shemitah, and again, because you're trying to, get wealthy in a way that you shouldn't, in the end, you'll become poor and you'll sell your field and you'll sell your house and you'll sell your daughter and eventually you'll sell yourself. Okay, and then it keeps on going in terms of how your fortunes are going to continue to get worse and worse. Okay, so v'nim karlach, sold to you, a fellow Jew. V'lo lach, not only to a fellow Jew, el ger, he'll even sell himself to a ger, presumably a ger toshav, a ger tzedek, a convert. Shenemar lager, v'lo lager tzedek, not only to a convert, el ger toshav, out of the nation, he'll sell himself to a resident alien. Shenemar lager toshav, okay, to a resident alien. And then the pasuk says, "Ola iker mishpachat ger." So mishpachat ger is zehanachri. So now it's not just a resident alien; it's a true foreigner. So if that's true, mishpachat ger means a true foreigner. Kishu omer la iker mishpachat ola iker. It's a hard word to translate, but anyway. But what does this word la'aker mean? If it doesn't just mean a foreigner you're sold to as a slave, it means then you're sold actually to the to the pagan temple. Rashi says it doesn't mean you necessarily worship Avodah Zarah, but you're hired as a slave in the pagan temple, and you're the one who chops the wood and who cleans the floors and
totally
so on.
Uprooted.
Okay. Oh yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Call the acre to uproot. All right. Good point. You're uprooted completely from Jewish context. Anyway, so the point is, I don't get this idea when it says amongst these stages of who you're sold to. So that's the Musar. But amongst these stages of who you could be sold to, one of them is that you could be sold to a convert. He says, I don't understand that. An Eved Ivri is not sold to a ger. Let's take a look. So he says, so this suggests the ger kani Eved Ivri, that a convert can acquire a Jewish slave, a Hebrew slave, Ramini. But I don't understand that because we teach ain't a ger nikna Eved Ivri. They each a ger kani Eved Ivri. A ger cannot be sold as an Eved Ivri, and a ger and a woman cannot purchase an Eved Ivri. And now it's going to explain why. A ger can't be purchased as an Eved Ivri. He can't be an Eved Ivri because an Eved Ivri goes free at at the Yovel and says v'shavel mishpachto, and he will return to his family. Okay, v'inan. So you need to return that pasuk to be relevant to him. V'ha leka, and in this case he doesn't have a family to return to. So because he does not get the restoration to this ancestral family, that happens in the Yovel, he can never be sold off to begin with. There's something very beautiful about that because, the ger is already the convert.
He's like already,
he's all right. He doesn't have a family. He is the sense, it's hard to have the same sense of belonging. So imagine the greater sense of alienation that comes is that now you're actually sold as a slave, which clearly has a sense that you're not one of us and so on. So that degree of alienation is tolerable by a naturally born Jew who already fundamentally has a sense of belonging and will return to that sense of belonging. But it's not acceptable by a ger. So a ger can't be sold as an Eved Ivri. The ain ish of a ger konim Eved Ivri. Okay, we just did it. The ain ish of a ger konim Eved Ivri. Now a ger and a woman cannot purchase an Eved Ivri. Why not? Isha lavor ara. A woman, it's not their cheretz. What's a woman doing? Called having a male slave. Who knows what's happening when we're not, behind closed doors. Okay, which raises interesting questions because a man can purchase a female slave, except when he buys a female slave, she's under bat mitzvah, and the purpose there is for marriage. So maybe we see that as less concerns. Okay, ger nami. Now, how come a ger cannot purchase an Eved Ivri? Gemiri, because we have a tradition. Demakni kani, delo makni lo kani. One who is, one who can be purchased as an Eved can purchase an Eved Ivri. One who cannot be purchased, since a ger himself cannot be sold as an Eved Ivri, he cannot own an Eved Ivri either. So now we've got a problem. A ger can't own an Eved Ivri, but this Breita says that, that speaks about being sold. It says leger means a convert. So how could it be sold to a convert if we just said a convert can't own an Eved Ivri? So Amar Rav Nachman, so here's the answer. It says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Eino Konet. No. It doesn't mean that a ger can't own an Eved Ivri. A ger can own an Eved Ivri. He can't own it v'dino k'Yisrael and have the status of a Yisrael who owns an Eved Ivri. Aval Konet v'dino k'Nachri. He can own an Eved Ivri with the status of a non-Jew that a non-Jew would have for owning an Eved Ivri. What's the difference? If you sell yourself to a Jew, sell yourself to a non-Jew. Somebody who has had the Eved that has the hole poked in the ear, so it's sold until the Yovel, and somebody sold to a non-Jew. If the owner dies, does not continue working for the children. Okay, if you're only sold, the irony is if you're only sold for 7 years or 6 years or whatever, it's a 6-year contract. So that contract remains binding if the owner dies and you continue to work for the estate. But if it is a selling like Olam, that the hole is pierced, or you're sold to a non-Jew, that's seen more as a fuller purchase, or maybe the other ways of understanding it. But anyway, and then it's only a special responsibility only to the purchaser himself. Okay, it doesn't extend to the second generation. So therefore, if a non-Jew can own an Eved Ivri, but with the limit that if he dies, he won't pass it down to his children. So the same is true about a ger. Yes, a ger can own an Eved Ivri. That's the pasuk, o leger, o le'eker mishpachat ger, or whatever. But even though he can be owned, he won't be owned as in the capacity of a Jew owning him. Yes.
I forget. The Nirtza is in perpetuity, or but the Yovel goes out.
Well, yes, to both. Torah says Olam, because I'll understand the Olam is limited by the Yovel. Okay, but anyway, so that's the answer. Yes, he can be owned by a ger. It's just that he will not pass down to the son. Yeah, so we're just reading the pasuk. O leger, o leker mishpachat ger. So the ger is a ger tzedek, and I don't know. Somehow I forget exactly, but how we exactly divide it. But anyway, one is ger tzedek. It says o leger toshav yimach, o leker mishpachat ger. So ger is ger tzedek, ger toshav is ger toshav, eker mishpachat ger is the non.
That was just a warning of an Nazarah aspect.
Right, it's just going to show you how far away you're going to, what will the fate that will befall you. That's the muster way Chazal read the pasuk. But here the halachic way is also saying that you could be sold to a ger. Well, the first stage of going down is that you're sold it's more stages removed from the immediate Jewish family. So that's okay.
What happens if you sold to a Gentile when Shemitah or Yovel comes? Nothing. Sold forever then?
Yeah, you mean the whole idea that an Eved Ivri goes free after 7 years, right? I think that's only if you're sold to a Jew, not if you're sold to a non-Jew, which also speaks about how you're getting yourself in a real difficult, position. Because the Gemara says that, Ododo vendodo yigalenu, right? That you have to be redeemed by, you have to get your freedom bought for you. So, right. Okay. So, the Gemara says like this. All right. So that's the ger. He didn't understand. Now here's the other thing he doesn't understand. First we have to finish spelling out the points here. And in each a ger can't purchase an Eved Ivri. So we already discussed that a ger really can, except that the laws are a little different. So the Gemara says, name of the look Reb Shimon Gamliel. Let's say this restriction on the woman is not like Reb Shimon Gamliel. The time we talked about it, Isha konis hashfachot, ve'eno konis havadim. A woman can purchase female slaves, but not male slaves. Reb Shimon Gamliel omer af konis havadim can purchase male slaves. So yes, it does seem like there's a debate. Can a woman purchase male slaves? No, the Gemara says no. I feel Reb Shimon Gamliel. It can be Reb Shimon Gamliel. Lo kasha. Kan be Eved Ivri, kan be Kanani. A woman can purchase non-Jewish male slaves, not Jewish male slaves. What's the difference? So the Gemara says Eved Ivri tzniela. Because the concern is that you have this male person under your control living in the house, right? So that it'll lead to sexual impropriety. So the point is, but if the guy's Jewish, you figure that, he'll be able to keep his mouth shut. So therefore, he won't go and publicize it. Okay, so therefore, we're more concerned that something is going to go wrong because the guy will be more discreet. Whereas if it's non-Jewish, we're afraid he won't keep his mouth shut, so it won't be discreet. So we're not as afraid that something is going to go wrong. Eved Kanani paritzla, Eved Kanani won't be discreet, and therefore there's less concern that something will go wrong. You could also say that maybe the non-Jew is seen as more foreign and therefore less likely to be a potential sexual partner. But anyway, the Gemara says the concern is less present in the case of the non-Jew. Of course, you could also say the non-Jew is more subject, right? It's more fully owned and therefore more, there's a greater power differential there. But the Gemara is not concerned about in the case of the non-Jew, only in the case of the Jew. All right, and as I said, a Jewish man can own female Jewish slaves, but that's only under bat mitzvah, so presumably we're not afraid of impropriety in that stage. Okay, the Gemara says like this: Elahad Reb Yosef, Armelaz lo sarbi kalba, a widow should not raise a dog. V'lo tishri bar beirav b'ushviza, and she should not host a yeshiva student in her inn, because again, we're afraid of either actual impropriety, or at least Tosfos says we're not really afraid of impropriety with the dog, but we're at least afraid of perceptions of impropriety. So the Gemara says, we understand why there's a concern about the yeshiva student, because that'll, because of the discreet. So because if they were to do something wrong, he would be discreet, we're concerned that it could lead to something wrong, or perceptions of impropriety. Elakalba, but a dog came into Mizrachba. If he were actually to have been doing some, sexual things with the dog would be like following after her. Okay, is the Gemara's understanding. Okay, so then it would be very public. So why should we be afraid? Obviously, nothing is going wrong because people would see the results of it. So the Gemara says, so Mirsasa, so she should be afraid. So Amri, no, you say, even the chishadle umsa misrach bas, but there are other reasons a dog could follow you around, because you're always throwing it juicy pieces of meat. So therefore, Aminchi, so people say, so it won't be public. People say, yeah, it's following her because she treats it so nicely and she gives it juicy bones or whatever. But, anyway, so we're afraid, therefore, that could lead to improprieties or just as perceptions of improprieties. Moving on. Ger Toshav Amr Le'inyan Ribbis Mahi. Now, I don't understand the meaning of the Ger Toshav in the Ribbis context. Why not? The pasuk says, if your brother becomes poor and his hand falters, you should strengthen him. A resident alien, and he should live with you. So this is, first of all, the obligation to help sustain the life of a ger toshav. Okay, not only a ger tzedek, even somebody that is just dwelling amongst you, or the way Chazal understand it, somebody who accepted the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. But then the pasuk ends by saying, not only do you have to sustain them, but do not take interest. So it sounds like you're not allowed to take interest from a ger toshav. It says ger v'toshav imach al tikach meito neshet v'tarbit. So the Gemara says, okay, that's the pasuk. Ramini, I'll ask you on this. And this is why we did, because we quoted this right earlier. You can borrow from non-Jews and lend to non-Jews with interest, and also with a ger toshav. You can borrow and lend in interest. How could you say that? The pasuk says, don't charge a ger toshav interest. It's an explicit pasuk. It doesn't, first it says achicha, and then it says ger v'toshav. It doesn't say don't take from them, out me'itoksi, don't take from him, Yisrael, don't take from the Jews. So it says, like, if your fellow becomes poor or a ger toshav, you should sustain them. Don't take from him, neshach v'tarbit. So the him now is referring not to the most proximate case, the ger toshav, but the first case. Don't take from your fellow Jew, but yes, you can take from the ger toshav. Okay, so that's a very interesting read of the pasuk. Shot of the pasuk certainly should be indicating otherwise. Yes, you cannot take interest from a non-Jew, but you can be a guarantor for a non-Jewish loan, which basically means like this. So, our friend Christopher here is. How would this work? Oh yeah, okay. Eli here is going to lend $1,000 at 10% interest to our friend Christopher, okay? And that he needs a co-signer. So I agreed, so I'm allowed, I can't borrow from Eli with interest, okay? But I can co-sign for a non-Jew on a loan that's been lent with interest. The only problem is if I'm now co-signing on that loan and the non-Jew defaults, Eli's going to collect from me, and I'm going to wind up having paid essentially interest from a Jew to a Jew. It's a little funny because I never borrowed the money to be seen of as if I'm paying, but one way to conceptualize an array of a cosigner is I will treat it as if you lent me the money. Okay, that's one way of seeing what a cosigner is, right? I'm also a borrower. So if that's true, and then Eli comes to me, then I'm paying Eli for interest for a loan. So that's the Gemara's question. Leman. Now, if you say that you can be a cosigner for a Jew-to-Jew loan of interest, that's certainly not true. The following people transgress. Anybody who's part of the whole process, whether it's the loaner, the borrower, the lender, the witness, or the cosigners. So clearly you can't be a cosigner for a Jew. You can be a cosigner for a non-Jew who borrows with interest. So now the Gemara still doesn't like it. Since the law of the non-Jews is that the lender can go first to the cosigner. If I cosign for the non-Jew and we were to be following non-Jewish law, Eli could come straight to me. So if he can come straight to me, I really am seen as the borrower in that case. So that's true. So basically, Eli's taking ribbis from me. It's like I borrowed the money and I'm paying it to Eli. He forgets the non-Jew. He comes straight to me. So how is that allowed? So no, we made an agreement that we were going to, even though Eli lent the money to the non-Jew and I co-signed, so there's Jews, non-Jews here, whatever, we said if we ever have to deal with this case adjudicated, we'll adjudicate it in Jewish court. Now in Jewish court, Eli has to first go to the borrower himself before coming to me. And therefore, it's okay. Why? Since he goes to the borrower himself, it's not considered like I lent money. He can only come to me if the borrower defaults. If that's true, so let's say the guy borrowed $1,000, paying 10% interest. By now he owes $1,500. Eli comes to collect. He defaults. Eli comes to me. At this stage, Eli says, you co-sign. Pay me $1,500. at that moment that I owe him $1,500. It never started that I initially owed $1,000 and now I'm paying an extra $500. No, because fundamentally his relationship was with the borrower, and therefore the borrower was increasing his debt. I was totally out of it. When the borrower now has a debt of $1,500 and he's defaulted, and Eli comes to me, my beginning of my relationship is a debt to Eli of $1,500. So it's not ribbons, right? I'm paying him more than the loan, but I never had the relationship of the loan. I just owe him now the full amount. Okay, so that's how come it can work. So the Gemara says, Israel, how do we let him, collect? How do we let him take interest at all? And I don't really get that, but maybe somehow the Gemara, what does that mean? I mean, is that going back to the earlier Gemara that you're not supposed to lend non-Jews with interest? Maybe it means that we wouldn't let you collect the increased amount from me because it was based on ribbis. Like, I don't really understand the question so much because it was allowed to lend the non-Jew with interest. Anyway, the Gemara says, no. You agreed that the interest part of the arrangement would be binding, even if you went to a Jewish court. Maybe the Jewish court didn't like interest even with non-Jews, but you said nevertheless, with that we're going to keep, But the adjudication of how to deal with the question of the Arev and the coastline or whatever, that we're going to deal with in the Jewish court. So because he doesn't go initially to me, I can actually wind up paying him a higher amount than the initial loan because I wasn't the borrower. You had a question, Eli?
It just seems like you entered into some sort of connection as being guarantor at the beginning when you signed. That's it.
The question is, how do we conceptualize it? When I co-sign, is it like you're lending me the money as well and you can collect from me? And if that's true, then I'm paying you interest. Or do we say, no, the co-signing is if this person defaults, I promise to cover his debt to you. So that's true. I never increased my debt to you. It was never a basic debt that then the amount increased. It's at the moment he defaults, that becomes my obligation to you. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Let's read a little bit further. Tana Rabbanan. I'm sorry, this kept line. A Jew can lend his money, can lend out the money of the non-Jew with the awareness of the non-Jew. So what does this mean? Let's take a look. Tana Rabbanan. But not so he's lending the money of a non-Jew with the awareness of the non-Jew, but not only with the awareness of the Jew. What does that mean? So thankfully we're going to explain it. Yisrael shalava maos min anachri b'ribis. Okay, I borrowed money from Christopher with ribis here. Okay, so I borrowed 1,000. Now I owe him 1,500. Okay, I'm taking my 1,500 to him. Matzo Yisrael acher. Now Eli bumps into me. And Eli says, namely, you know what? Give me that $1,500. And I'll continue to pay interest. So, you've never paid back Christopher there. You still owe him the money. But transfer the loan to me. But Christopher isn't agreeing to it. So now you want that $1,500. You're going to agree to pay interest. But the only way it's going to work, since Christopher hasn't been consulted, is you're going to pay me the interest and then I'm going to pay up to Christopher. Right? So that's not okay because you're paying me interest. Right? So that's not okay. But let's say, fine, let's go to Christopher. So we go to Christopher, and Eli says, you know what? $1,500, I'm going to give it to Eli. I'm stepping out of this. Now it's between the two of you. And now you're going to pay him the interest. That's okay. Okay? But the chiddush here is, he didn't give you the $1,500. I gave you the $1,500. That was money that was supposed to go to him. But in this context, it seemed like he's giving it to you, and it's your relationship to him, and I'm out of it. And therefore, it's okay. The Cain, Nachi Shalava Mos Yisrael. How about the flip? Christopher borrowed money from me, now he's coming back to me with the 1,500, the 1,000 plus the 500 of interest payments. Eli bumps into namely, you know what? Give that money to me. I'll pay you, Christopher. You'll continue to pay dough. That's fine. Your relationship is with the non-Jew. My relationship is with the non-Jew. That's okay. So in that case, that's okay. But if you and Christopher come to me and say, no, Christopher is now out of the picture. Now I'm going to continue with you. So now you're paying me ribbis. Okay, it's forbidden. Okay, So I guess what we'll do here is, unfortunately, we'll have to stop at this moment, and we'll sort of continue to unpack this. But this is going to be very interesting because initially we dealt with how Rabbeinu Tam solved the whole problem of lending to non-Jews at all with interest based on a Gemara. This is going to be a major way in which Jews found a huge loophole to lend to fellow Jews with interest. Can people see what the way is?
Yeah, the non-Jew in the middle.
You use the non-Jew as the cutout. Right, so so I lend to the non-Jew, the non-Jew lends to you, ultimately, whatever. So that's going to be what we'll discuss tomorrow. Okay.